Sarah Stockdale is an amazing woman with a fan base. She is an entrepreneur, a growth hacker, the founder and CEO of Valkyrie, a Toronto-based growth consultancy. She has over a decade of experience working with tech startups. She's an amateur stand-up comic. She's a TEDx speaker. She's also the creator and curator of We Need to Talk About This. It is a weekly newsletter that goes out. It's comedic, it's feminist, it's culture-driven, and if you're not subscribed already, you should be, because it will make your Wednesday mornings a delight. Please give a very warm Creative Mornings welcome to Sarah Stockdale.
So I'm going to tell you about the loneliest month of my life. I know you came here to hear about community. Bear with me. It was July of 2010, and I had just moved to Toronto. I saw some people stand up. I was there. I had just moved to Toronto to go to grad school at Ryerson University and to take a position in leadership. And I moved in July, even though school didn't start until September, and my job didn't start until August because I am a keener. And I didn't know anyone. And something you should know about me for this story is I'm from a really small town, and so small, this was on one of the only photos that I could find of it online. So I'm from Dorchester, Ontario, and Dorchester is the kind of town where we got our second stoplight when I was in grade 8. If you need to see anyone who's anyone, like the Soho House of Toronto, the Tim Hortons in Dorchester, Ontario is where you need to go. It's where everyone is. I worked at the local grocery store, and if you came into that grocery store, I didn't just know you. I knew all of your cousins, I knew your Aunt Beth, and I knew who your sister kissed at the Optimist Hall dance. So I'm used to small. I'm used to not a lot of people. So coming to Toronto, I was around more people than I'd ever been around in my life, and I didn't know anyone. It was the most alone I had ever been. And it was very depressing. And coming from a family of generalized anxiety and depression, this was my worst month. I lived on a university campus in a residence building that was like this. My room was like this big, and there was a bed in the middle of the room, and it looked like someone 50 years ago had been murdered on the floor. And I didn't talk to almost anyone for that whole month face-to-face. People in Toronto do not make eye contact. But I did make one friend. His name was George. And he hung outside of Yonge and Dundas Square. I found out that he was a vet and that he really liked pretzels. And so I would come up out of the subway every time I was at Yonge and Dundas Square, and I'd go to that gross little Aunt Annie's that's in the bottom of Yonge and Dundas, and I would bring George a pretzel. And we got kind of friendly. George was in a wheelchair, and he was always kind of in the same spot, so I could always find him. And we did that for about a month, which was really nice. And it was some of my only human contact in the city for that month. George was very important to me. So one day I got George his pretzel at Aunt Annie's and braved the gross little escalator that goes up out of Yonge and Dundas Square and walked out into the craziness of Yonge and Dundas Square, and George wasn't there. George was physically there, but something had happened. Something had changed. George didn't recognize me. So I went to give him his pretzel, and he started screaming. And then he started chasing me. And George chased me all the way down the street, and if I can remember how he put it so eloquently, he was yelling, "Titties, titties!" I debated saying that in front of all of you. So I went back to my residence room, murder, crime scene, residence room, and I changed. And it's something that I have a little bit of shame about, because as a small town person, you're not supposed to do this. But I put on my city girl cloak of armor. I feel like most of you, if you live in Toronto, you have one of these. So I would wear my headphones everywhere I went in the city, even if I wasn't listening to anything. I practiced my dead-eyed streetcar stare like something crazy is happening, but I am not aware of it. My mind is somewhere else. I'm here. How many of you have that stare? Practice it? Yeah? Okay. And I stopped making eye contact with people on the street. And eye contact is a recognition of someone else's humanity. So when you stop making eye contact with people, you stop recognizing them as people. And so you become the protagonist of your single storyline. And you go through your life, and you try to move your plot forward, and the city is a set, and everyone in the city are just extras. And we all know from watching movies that extras don't really matter, right? They're either a punchline or a roadblock. They don't move the plot forward. So why would we engage with them? I think of this a lot when I think of my industry. I work in tech. I've spent, as Christina said, a decade working at early stage startups. And the last company that I worked for was in Silicon Valley. And Silicon Valley, if you've never been there, is kind of like if mansplaining was a city. So I come from an industry that values the protagonist, that values the single story. So what I worry about in tech is we have this thing called the cult of the founder. I don't know, how many of you actually work in tech who are here? Holy cow, my people, hello. So there's the cult of the founder. We all really care a lot about the people who originate a company. You know, the Steve Jobs, the Mark Zuckerberg, the Elon Musk, and that asshole that started Uber. So I'm going to tell you something about myself that's maybe a career-limiting move because I'm a consultant for tech startups, but I don't really give a shit about founders. I don't really care. And I'm kind of alone in this, right? Aaron Sorkin, who's my favorite TV writer, wrote not one, but 2 feature films on tech startup founders. So our culture really values those stories. And I can tell you from working those stories that they don't really matter as much as we think they do. I call that story the story of the lonely genius. And this is a story we've all heard, right? This is the arc. 20-something-year-old guy who's kind of a loner and kind of an asshole goes to an Ivy League university, and it is always a white guy. And he is always straight, usually. He's always straight. So a straight white guy goes to an Ivy League university, is kind of a loner, and is kind of an asshole. And then he drops out, because that's the cool part, right? He dropped out of school. Then he teaches himself to code, because no one educated this guy, right? There's no one in his network that helped him. He teaches himself to code. And then he builds something himself. We don't talk about the other people in that basement spending all-nighters with him. He builds it himself, and it's genius, of course, because he is. And then he meets, by some happenstance, not through a network or through his Ivy League institution, he meets institutional investors in Silicon Valley that can give him millions of dollars to build his dream. Nobody connected him to them. It just happened. He meets these amazing investors, and they pour millions and millions of dollars into his business. And of course, there are some trials and tribulations to make him relatable. But the end result is you have this amazing billionaire we all look up to as a creative idol and we love. And we write books about him, and we write movies about him. And we all think of ourselves as maybe one day I could do that. Maybe one day that could be me. But that's not actually true. That's not actually how life works. And I think the narrative of the lonely genius is actually really dangerous. You guys are all here really early in the morning on a Friday, and there are a lot of you, believe me, I'm up here looking at you. So you're probably a little bit like me, a little bit type A, a little bit ambitious, and you want to get your creativity and your dreams out into the world. And the story of the lonely genius tells us that that's all on us. That all of that weight we have to carry, that is, we are the only person who can make that happen, regardless of the communities that we're from, of the struggles that we've faced in our lives. You know, Zuckerberg went to Harvard. Steve Jobs went to Stanford. They basically were in the petri dishes of the world's privilege. That's where all of the money and influence stays, and we pretend that that didn't have an impact on their ability to become who they are. But that is such a huge piece of their success, and when it's invisible, when we make those communities invisible, we all have to carry that weight of our individual success just ourselves. Self-made is a lie. People are made by other people. People are educated by other people. To say that someone is self-made erases their identity in their society and the true nature of power. Power is social. That's why they call it the boys' club. It's a club for a reason. So I worry that we are putting so much pressure on ourselves when we don't actually live in the kind of society that will enable us to live the story of the lonely genius. The lonely geniuses didn't even live that story themselves. They had a lot of help. Someone educated you, someone connected you, someone took care of you. Your success is a product of a collective effort. When I was writing this talk, I called my friend, who is like a world-renowned TED speaker, to give me advice. My talk isn't even my individual effort. I had collective help with this. Some of the collective help is literally sitting right here. No one does anything in a vacuum. No success comes from just one person. So I think we need to move from the narrative of the lonely genius to the narrative of the collective genius. My sister, who's a feminist PhD theorist and very cool, told me the other day that power isn't created, power is transferred. We give each other our power, and that's how we become successful. We give each other our knowledge, our creativity, our ideas, and our genius, and together we can create something that means something. So I have some ideas. Christina just didn't ask me to come up here and preach about why we shouldn't care about Mark Zuckerberg. I have some ideas on how we can build the kinds of communities that can transfer this power and make this real. And my first idea is that I think we should be infinitely curious about humans and about other people, and not just the ones that we think can do something for us. One of the coolest stories that I ever heard from my stepfather was one of the top people at Imperial Oil used to get really excited to talk to the staff at the company, and all staff. He would get excited about the janitorial staff and ask them about what cleaning products they used to make everything smell so good. He was infinitely curious about the people around him. I took my mom to a party, so if you were wondering if I'm cool, sorry. I took my mom to a party once. My mom is the kind of woman who makes friends with everyone. She literally got us invited to a villa in Florida, standing in line for a ride at Disney. And so I brought her around and introduced her to some of my old colleagues and some of my friends, and she met a woman named Susan, who I worked with, and she chatted with Susan for a while, and then she came up to me after and goes, "Oh my God, Sarah, your mom is the coolest lady I've ever met. She's so lovely and interesting and kind. I love her. Thank you so much for bringing her." And so I was like, cool, I should tell my mom that. That'll make her happy. So I went up to my mom and I said, "Oh my God, Susan loves you. What did you tell her?" And my mom looks at me and goes, "I didn't tell her anything. She didn't ask me a single question." We had an entire conversation and I didn't speak. If you think you can't go to a networking event or you can't come out to a community like this unless you're interesting or important or have a cool jacket, no one cares. No one cares because it's not about you, it's how you make people feel. And if you make people feel important, they will be your friend forever. And that's all you have to do in this community today in that little networking session after. The sexiest thing you can ask a human is, "Tell me your story." There's another piece to this, and it's a cautionary tale. If you want to make authentic connections and be infinitely curious about people and transfer power, you cannot send me shit like this. It's constant. I bet we all have a LinkedIn message in our inbox right now that looks exactly like this. This is what I want. This is some stuff about me. This is how I think you can help me, from someone you've never seen before, you've never met. If you want to connect with someone who's outside your network, make sure you're finding ways to be curious about their experience and add value to who they are. That's how you create a relationship. Networking just means business cards. All that matters is your connections and your relationships. My next idea is that I think we should all try a little harder to be of service. When we're in our lonely genius narrative, when we're the only protagonist, we stop thinking about what we can do for the community, what we can do for the people around us, and how we can move forward together. I'll tell you a story that I have a little bit of shame about. So when I was early in my tech career, I wasn't managing people yet, and I was hustling. I was working long hours, I was working my ass off, and we hired someone new. He came from legal and didn't have a lot of tech experience, and I was already kind of incredulous, like, who are you? And he came in, and it was clear, he hadn't done it before. He was learning. But I was moving so fast and trying to get so much done and checking my dashboards at 6 a.m. and being a crazy type A ambitious person like we all are. And I thought he was slowing me down. And so I went for a one-on-one with my boss, and we were chatting about this, and I was being kind of the arrogant asshole, lonely genius. My story matters, my success matters, this guy's slowing me down, get rid of him. And my boss looks at me and says, okay, help him. Bring him up to your level, get him there. And my 22-year-old confidence was like, why would I help my competition? If there's gonna be a promotion, if there's gonna be more money, I wanna be better than him. So why would I help him? And that probably delayed me a leadership promotion by about 6 months. Because leaders don't compete. Leaders disperse their power. They help the people around them, even when it's hard and even when they don't like them. If you can make everyone around you better, you'll always have a job. The next piece is do the work. So I write this newsletter that Christina mentioned, and at the very beginning of writing it, which was, I know, 19 weeks ago, because I do all of the episodes, and not very many people were subscribed to it, just a couple of my friends and a couple of people in my network who were supporting me, but maybe not super jacked about a feminist newsletter at 6 a.m. on Wednesdays. And I was sitting up at midnight working on it, and my husband is just like, what are you doing? You're a morning person, go to bed. 10 p.m. is your cut-off bedtime. But if you want to build an authentic, real community, you have to put the muscle behind it. I'll show you some photos of kids partying. So this is the company that I used to work for. It's called Tilt. And we built probably the biggest community ambassador team in the world. We had 6,000 student evangelists in 8 countries who were constantly working for free to help us build this product. This is them at a giant festival, Lollapalooza, one of the ones young people go to. And this is a guy with seashells over his nipples. They used to bring our flag everywhere. This is some students who brought it up the top of a mountain. This is some students who took it camping with them. And when the product was acquired by Airbnb, we had someone write us a eulogy. And the technology behind this was basically a bank. So I show you those photos, and that looks impressive, and that looks pretty cool, right? If you can get 6,000 students in 8 countries to evangelize something, that's a brand marketer's dream. But what you're not seeing is these postcards. We would write 500 of them every 4 months. Every quarter, we would handwrite 500 postcards. This is from my old intern, Tony, and that is an analog fire emoji. This is Tabish, one of our interns, packing boxes of swag to send to ambassadors because we didn't have enough budget to get someone to do it for us. We would literally walk down the street holding all of these boxes to the post office, and the lady hated us. We'd hold up the line for hours. When you see those photos, you don't see the work behind it. You don't see the months of having conversations on Facebook with students. You don't see the months of creating content to try to get them engaged and going to student events. And I literally stood up the first time I spoke at a university, and there were 4 people in the audience. And I had driven 2 hours to be there and took a whole day. And I was like, these 4 people are gonna have fun. We're gonna do this thing. If you want to build a real community, you have to do the work. You have to care about the 5 people, and then care about the 20 people, and then care about the 50 people so that you can have 4,000 followers, so that you can have an audience for your art or your work. It doesn't happen right away, and it takes a lot of work, but it is so, so worth it. Today, if you can make 3 authentic connections, that is the beginning of your network. If you can add value to 3 people in this audience, then they will like you and they will introduce you to 3 people that they really like, and those people will be awesome, and you will start there. The next part is don't stop. If we had stopped trying to build an ambassador program when I hired a bunch of the kids that I babysat, because I didn't know anyone in university, and they weren't that excited about it because they didn't even know what the thing was, if we had stopped trying, we would never have been able to accomplish that. Growth compounds. Community growth compounds. If you're looking to get an audience for your art or for your work, you have to start small, and you have to work at it. And every week, every day, you're going to see that growth compound. You're going to see more and more people come in. More and more people are going to tell their friends about your work. More and more people are going to tell their friends about your speaking. And you're going to get more and more opportunities. But it doesn't continue if you stop. If you get bored because only 10 people are following you. You have to keep doing it because the growth will compound over time. So today, we are going to go out into the world after this. We are going to be infinitely curious about the people in our lives. We are going to make eye contact with people in Toronto. I know, it's a little bit scary, but we're going to try. It's an experiment. We're going to try it together. There is safety in numbers. We'll try it together. We're going to take out our headphones and we're going to smile at some strangers and make some eye contact and recognize their humanity. We're going to do the work and we're not going to stop doing the work until it's real. The collective genius is powerful because everyone in this room can be part of it. We can transfer power to each other, we can share knowledge, we can call our friend Drew before our talk and get help. Your success will be part of this group. Your success will be part of every collective you have access to. It is not your weight to carry anymore, you can let it go. Thank you. Woo.